All right, so this topic might go on for a little bit longer than what I normally would shoot, but I want to talk about the importance of due diligence. And there are several investigations that need to be conducted when you are making an offer on a piece of property. So what is due diligence? If you know what it is, leave me a comment in below. If you've bought property before, you understand that. But if it's the first time you're hearing this phrase, then you need to listen up and listen up closely, because I'm going to explain it. Due diligence is actually a period of time that a buyer goes to a seller for a piece of property and says, hey, I'd like to buy your property, but I want to take a few weeks to do my investigations and make sure that it's a good piece of property to buy. And the seller will say, okay, well, sure. What are you going to give me for it? Generally, that's money. So when you're going to make an offer on a piece of property, you have your purchase price, you have your earnest money deposit, which typically sits in an escrow account it could sit with your agent in their trust account, or it could sit with an attorney. That money is not going to be used until you've actually consummated the deal. So it's going to sit there. But this due diligence, you give that fee to the seller in order to take the house, what we would consider somewhat off the market, so that the appropriate inspections can be done. So this is a fee that you will not get back. It will be credited to you at the close of the sale if you buy the property, but you won't actually physically get this money back. So if you decide that, let's say your due diligence period, you negotiate a 3-week due diligence period, okay? Like I said, everything's negotiable. The amount of the fee is negotiable. The amount of the due diligence period is negotiable. These are things that you're going to negotiate with, have your agent negotiate for you if you have one, before the contract is actually executed between you and the seller. So let's say you have a 3-week due diligence period and you want to cancel the contract because you find out that the house has got a bad foundation and the seller's not going to repair. What you can do is, if you give written notification, basically a cancellation or termination letter, to either the seller or the seller's agent before 5 o'clock on the last day of due diligence, then you have the opportunity to keep your earnest money deposit and use that for another property. However, you will not get that money back if it's past 5 o'clock on the due diligence day, because whether you communicate or not to the seller, it is implied that you are going to go ahead and proceed with the purchase of that property. Doesn't mean that you have to buy that property. You can cancel the contract anytime, but you run the risk of the seller now having a claim to your earnest money deposit if you do not communicate or you do not cancel that particular contract before the end date of your due diligence period. So if I'm making any sense to you, type of down in the bottom in the comments. Let me know I'm making sense to you. If I'm not making any sense, just go ahead and give me question marks. I will go ahead and answer any questions that you have offline. But I know that this can be a topic that is, that can be about as clear as mud, but also it's one of the most important sections in the offer to purchase and contract, and you have to understand it, and you have to have an agent that can really sit down and go with you and explain why it's so important, because there are certain elements of the due diligence in that whole entire period that weaves its way through the entire offer to purchase and contract. But you have to be in a good relationship with your loan officer to make sure you can go back and say, hey, I'm approaching the end of my due diligence period. I have not heard back whether or not, the appraisal has come back good, or, I've not gotten my loan approval. Is it time for me to go ahead and terminate this and walk with my earnest money deposit, or do you think that I'm okay to proceed with the purchase of the property? It's going to be real important that you have a good relationship with your lender and be able to ask those kinds of questions, because if you can't purchase the property without the loan and you terminate the agreement after the due diligence period, then the seller has claim to your earnest money deposit and any additional earnest monies that you may have put down when you wrote the offer to purchase and contract. So a couple other things that you want to make sure that you give yourself enough time for in your due diligence period is to make sure that you can have your home inspections completed. You want to make sure that you can get a home inspector in. They normally take anywhere between 24 to 48 hours to get the report back to you. That way you can kind of go over it with a fine-tooth comb and see whether or not there are things in there that you want to negotiate with the seller as far as repairs are concerned. Now, the seller does not have to make any repairs. Again, it's a negotiation. You come up with a list, you submit a list of repairs. Hopefully that list of repairs is submitted still within that due diligence period. So therefore, the seller can either say yay or nay to whether or not they're going to make any repairs. You get your termite inspections, your pest inspections done to make sure the property is free and clear of termites. You cannot close on a home in North and or South Carolina with evidence of termites being present. You also want to make sure that if you want to get a survey done, you make sure you get a survey done and make sure that you're not encroaching on somebody else's property. The appraisal, once again, that ties into it as well. And you also want to look at what condition that the streets are in. Are the streets private or are they public? If they're private, then that means the homeowners are responsible for any maintenance and upkeep of the streets in that particular subdivision that you're looking at. If they're public, then that means they've already been accepted by the city and or the county that you live in, so they will be responsible for the maintenance. So these are all the things that you want to make sure that you and your realtor are working on during that due diligence period, because it's all the information that you're going to gather during that time to make sure whether or not you're a go or a no-go on a piece of property. I know that was a lot. Please leave your comments down below. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have in the comments. But until next time, I really appreciate you guys watching. Please subscribe if this was good information for you. And until next time, I'm here to help you make wise decisions when it comes to real estate.